Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. If this is your first time here, my name is Hannah. Today I'm going to try something a little bit different. Instead of doing a complete month wrap-up at the beginning of the month, I'm actually going to try to do a mid-month one. So I have 4 books here, one of which I had to DNF. So this should go through quicker. I just really dislike starting the month with like a 30-minute long video. It feels like a lot. It's a lot to edit, and I'd rather just try to keep my videos a little bit shorter and not feel like I have to talk less about the books to make the video shorter. So the first book I started with this month actually turned out to be really good. That is The Devourers by Indra Das. We got another shiny cover here. This was published in 2016. It is considered a horror fantasy and deals with LGBTQ+ themes. This book was actually suggested to me through the site Storygraph. People are suggesting that as a Goodreads alternative, so I wanted to try it out. And the cover is what first caught my attention on this, and it really just ended up being the perfect book that I was looking for at the time. So Storygraph is pretty good with their recommendations so far. So this book takes place in India, and the gist of it is that the main character, Alec, he runs into this strange guy who claims to be half a werewolf. He literally claims that on page 2, so it starts right into it, which I really appreciated. And this stranger tells Alec a story that really just entrances him, like literally. And he really wants to know more. So he kind of follows this guy, and this stranger ends up offering Alec a job where the stranger has these really old scrolls in a language that Alec doesn't understand, but he's transcribed them into these journals that he's now asking Alec to transcribe onto the computer so he can have like printed versions of them. Alec accepts, and a majority of this book is a retelling of those stories that are in the scrolls, and those are really old. That part of the book takes place in the 1600s, and for me it's the most interesting part of the book by far. Those sections are told from 2 different point of views, one being a woman named Sierra, who is actually the only significant female character in the book. Her point of view was my absolute favorite, and I wish there was even more of her in this. Once the book is finished with the old stories, it goes back to Alec and the stranger and kind of their relationship and what happens with them in the end. I do feel like the end part is a bit dragged out. There were multiple instances where I thought the ending of the book was coming up, but then there were still several more chapters, and it just kind of felt like it went on and on a bit. So that did kind of bring down my rating by half a star, but I still rated this 4 out of 5. I really enjoyed it. I was completely enthralled by it. This book really just casts a spell on you, and it really made me want to binge it. One thing I'd like to say about this book, though, is it is a pretty brutal book. There is a lot of gore, there's descriptions of bodily fluids, it's quite a graphic story, so definitely content warning for that. Also content warning for rape. That, however, is not graphic, but it is mentioned a lot. So even though this book is written in a very beautiful way, it is very rough. If you'd like to hear more of my thoughts on this book, I did do a reading vlog on this, so I will have a card of that up above. The next book I read for February is one that has been really hyped up, so I had some pretty high expectations going in, but I didn't know too much about it besides that this girl bleeds on this canvas and this creature comes out of it, and that book would be Pet by Akweke Emeze. I wasn't as captured by this book as everyone else seems to be. It ended up being kind of disappointing for me in the end. However, this book did have some pretty interesting themes, so I did enjoy that. This book was published in 2019 and is a YA fantasy and has LGBTQ+ themes. So this book takes place in a world that is pretty much our own. Like the beginning part was pretty much just a complete parallel to the things that have been happening the past few years. They call the bad people monsters, and the people that kind of saved our world angels. However, the kids that are growing up in this world pretty much don't really understand what monsters are. They claim that there aren't monsters in this world anymore, and so the children just have questions of what happened, but the adults are really kind of hush-hush about what happened. They do, however, know that there was this huge revolution that a lot of the adults fought in to create the world that they live in today. And the main character that's here on the cover, she is actually transgender, and her name is Jam. From the cover, I thought she was only going to be like 10 or 11 years old, but I think she's actually 16, because at one point in the book it even mentions something that she said and did when she was 15, so that she has to be at least older than that. However, the way she's written through the book, it really feels like she's younger than that. Anyway, Jem ends up going into her mother's art studio where she just finished this painting. She ends up bleeding on the canvas, and this creature comes out that calls itself Pet. Pet is here saying that he needs to kill this monster that happens to be in the house of her best friend Redemption. So the main part of the book is them trying to figure out who the monster is, what they've done, and how they can protect Redemption and his family. Even though this book isn't very long, like I think it's less than 300 pages. Oh god, it's barely even 200. Yeah, no, it's less than like 200 pages. The pacing felt really slow to me. Like I just really couldn't get into it, even though I absolutely loved the concept of Pet. I also liked how the fact that Jam is transgender was just kind of a casual thing. Like it talked about her kind of transitioning to explain her life a bit more, but it wasn't all about her being this trans character. Another thing that I appreciate that was normalized is her best friend's family actually consists of his parents plus another woman. So his parents are polyamorous, where it's one guy and two women and they're all in a relationship with each other. That was very normalized. It was never written as an odd or unusual thing, and I really appreciated that as well. So the representation in this book ended up being really fantastic. However, Jam herself just came off as a really whiny character to me. A lot of the interactions with her and Pet are them arguing and disagreeing on what course of action they should take and what's going on. And that just kind of grated on me a bit. I'm not sure if it's because this is a YA, but it felt almost more of even more immature book than that. So in the end, I ended up rating this a 2, which makes me feel really weird seeing all the overwhelmingly positive reviews. I just don't think I really clicked with the character or the story much. I did like the ending, but I think Jam just kind of got on my nerves a little too much. As a content warning for this book, there is nothing graphic at all, but there is implied sexual assault. They never really come out and say it, but it's heavily implied. So that is the one warning I would give for this book. This next book is a short story collection that I tried to read, but I had to DNF it after the third story, which did not finish. And that is Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. This was published in 2017 and is a horror fantasy short story collection that also has LGBTQ+ themes, which I guess that was kind of the theme of the beginning of this month as well. After reading the book Revenge last month, I was really looking for more like that, and I think that's kind of what drew me to this one in the beginning. However, this just seemed like nonsense for the sake of nonsense, as the stories didn't make sense at all, and there was just no way to really analyze them to have a better understanding or anything like that. They do not interconnect at all either, so they're just standalones. The first one was okay. It kind of dealt with themes of folklore added into the story itself. I really had to think for a minute there what the second one was, because it's that forgettable. The second one is just it's literally called Inventory, and it's literally this woman just kind of writing down in a journal of all of her sexual encounters. But there's also a virus that was like released onto the world, and so we kind of see how the virus is affecting the world through her encounters as well, which with Corona happening, I really didn't want to read about that. That's definitely not anything I'm looking for in my reading time. So that one was a bust. And then the third one just completely went off the rails, where you didn't know what was true, false, was there like some weird time travel, like none of it made any sense. There was no making sense of it at all, and I just wasn't amused. I ended up skimming the last part of that one even just because I was bored, and I just gave up after that. I really just did not want to read any more of it. Some booktubers I follow did give this like 4 and 5 star ratings, so I don't know if I would have liked it better if I kept going, but I mean, if I don't like it after 3 stories, then I'm probably not gonna like it overall anyway. So this one I was really sad about DNFing, but it happens. And this last book I read, I actually just finished filming a reading vlog of it as well. This video will probably be posted before that though, so I'll add a card when I'm actually done editing and have posted that. And that is The Uncensored Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. This was the version my library had. It didn't have, I guess, the censored version. This doesn't even have a description of the story at all on it. It just talks about how, since this is the uncensored one, it includes more homosexual content, which made me believe that this was going to be a graphic book. However, it is not at all. And the only blatant homosexual content is that there's a man that has a crush on another man, and then there's a sentence describing Dorian Gray like wearing a dress, and that's about it. Anything else would be pretty subtle, so it just seems kind of bizarre to me that this was censored in the first place, but this was published in 1890, so obviously that was the reason. And this is the first of the classics that I've read this year. I do have another video where I list 8 classics that I want to read either this year or next year, and this was my first shot at it. So my preconceived notions of Dorian Gray going into this ended up being completely wrong. Like everything that I've seen about him in media, I thought that he had lived for a few hundred years already, that he really had established himself as this character that like seduces everyone. He's just very wealthy and just knows who he is and what he wants, like that kind of thing. And I always viewed the portrait that's locked away as something that's aging instead of him, and that's why he's immortal. Yeah, it's not like that. He actually lives a pretty short life, so that was a major shock to me. And this is also more of an origin story than anything, which kind of surprised me in the beginning. Like, we start where the painter Basil is painting his portrait, and I really thought we would start like years after that, so that kind of surprised me. But I was excited because I thought, oh, okay, and we're gonna see how this portrait kind of becomes magical. And that doesn't really happen either. It's one of those things where it's like, it is because it is. Like, Dorian, when he sees the portrait, is kind of like, oh, I wish this portrait would age instead of me. Like, I wish it would show the horrors instead of me. And so he kind of has this prayer, and it comes true for some reason. There's really no rhyme or reason behind it. It happens just because. There are 3 main characters in this story. It starts out with Basil the painter and his friend Lord Henry having a conversation, and then Dorian enters the picture. They're all friends, especially Dorian and Lord Henry, and a lot of the book is just showing how Lord Henry really influences Dorian into seeing that his youth and beauty are his only good attributes, and that he really needs to cherish them while they last. And this kind of corrupts Dorian. Lord Henry is a pretty bad influence, and pretty much Lord Henry's motivations as well are just like, oh, I want to see what happens because of psychology purposes. So this book goes on a lot of rants that deal with psychology and philosophy that are just really boring. Like, I almost fell asleep a few times. It was just too much, and I was just really expecting it to get into what sins Dorian is committing, and it really doesn't either. It's, like I said, it's not a graphic book at all in the end. There's a lot of subtleties here, and it's pretty much just people saying, oh, like, he does bad things, but they never specify what those bad things are, which is a little odd to me, but I guess it leaves it up to your imagination. The end, however, is superb. It's definitely the best part of this book. However, I'm just not sure if everything leading up to it is worth it. We really get to see Dorian Gray as like the villain that he is, which I thought was awesome. And the ending of this just really surprised me. I didn't see it coming. I really didn't know that's how Dorian Gray's story goes. Like, gosh, it was just so surprising to me. So based on the ending alone, it bumped this up to a 2.5 instead of a 2 for me. It was just an okay book. I'm really glad I finally know the story of Dorian Gray in the end, but I feel like this could have been so much better. I'm glad it's a pretty short story though, because the parts that dragged really dragged, and I couldn't imagine dealing with that in a longer story. So that's all. Today is actually only February 8th, so I'm not sure how many books will be in the second part of this video, but like I said, this is something I just wanted to try out, to try to make the videos a bit smaller. I'm also going to be reading a lot thicker books the second part of the month, so I'll probably end up with about 4 books as well. Well, thank you for hanging out with me, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. That really helps me figure out if I'm doing okay or not, and I'll see you next time.